There is a quiet moment many people experience, often late at night or in the early hours of the morning, when the noise of the world finally softens and an uncomfortable question begins to surface. Why does it feel like I am working so hard, yet my financial reality refuses to change? This question is rarely about money alone. Beneath it lives a deeper exhaustion, the fatigue of trying to force outcomes, the frustration of doing everything right, and the silent fear that perhaps something essential has been misunderstood along the way. Prosperity, in this sense, becomes less about numbers and more about alignment. For decades, science and philosophy have been circling the same realization from different angles. Reality does not respond only to effort, but to coherence. Dr. Joe Dispenza often describes this as the moment when the brain and the heart begin to speak the same language. When thoughts pull in one direction and emotions pull in another, the body remains trapped in survival mode, repeating the past instead of creating something new. Financial struggle, in many cases, is not a lack of opportunity, but a reflection of internal patterns that were never consciously chosen. Napoleon Hill observed this long before neuroscience had the tools to measure it. He noticed that wealth consistently followed those who cultivated a definite inner state before external success ever appeared. Not optimism, not wishful thinking, but a quiet certainty rooted in identity. The universe, in this view, does not respond to what we want. It responds to who we are being. This video is an invitation to explore that inner architecture, not through promises of instant wealth or spiritual shortcuts, but through a grounded understanding of how connection, coherence, and conscious intention reshape financial reality from the inside out. As you continue, allow yourself to listen beyond technique, beyond strategy, and into the deeper intelligence that has been guiding you all along, even when you felt lost. When inner frequency becomes financial reality, long before money appears as income, opportunity, or stability, it exists as a pattern of perception. Most people are taught to look at finances as something external: markets, employers, circumstances, timing. Yet beneath these visible structures operates a quieter layer, one that rarely receives attention because it cannot be measured with numbers alone. This layer is frequency, not in a mystical sense detached from reality, but as a lived state of being that continuously informs decisions, reactions, and expectations. Financial reality, in this way, becomes a mirror, reflecting how the nervous system has learned to interpret safety, worth, and possibility. Many individuals live in a constant state of subtle contraction. The body tightens when bills arrive. The breath shortens when future expenses are imagined. The mind rehearses loss more fluently than expansion. Over time, this internal posture becomes familiar, even invisible. Joe Dispenza explains that the body memorizes emotional states faster than the conscious mind realizes. When stress and anticipation of lack repeat themselves daily, the body begins to expect them, and expectation quietly shapes behavior. Opportunities are missed, not because they do not exist, but because the nervous system does not recognize them as safe. This is where frequency becomes practical rather than abstract. Frequency is not something one tries to raise, it is something one reveals by removing internal resistance. A person who lives in constant alertness sends a signal of urgency to the environment. Decisions become reactive. Short-term relief replaces long-term vision. Even success, when it arrives, feels unstable because the internal state that produced struggle has not changed. Napoleon Hill described this pattern as drifting, not because people lack ambition, but because they remain internally divided, pulled between desire and doubt. Financial patterns often originate in early emotional experiences rather than logical reasoning. A child who observed instability learns to equate money with danger. Another who witnessed conflict around success may associate wealth with loss of connection. These associations settle quietly into the subconscious and later express themselves as hesitation, self-sabotage, or chronic overworking. Carl Jung referred to these unseen influences as complexes, autonomous emotional patterns that operate below awareness while shaping outcomes above it. When inner frequency remains unexamined, effort alone becomes exhausting. People work harder, learn more strategies, consume more information, yet feel strangely stuck. This is not failure, it is feedback. The system is signaling incoherence. Thoughts may aim toward abundance, but emotions remain anchored in protection. The heart seeks expansion, while the body prepares for threat. In such a state, manifestation becomes inconsistent, not because the universe withholds, but because the signal being transmitted is fragmented. Financial coherence begins when perception shifts from control to clarity. Instead of forcing outcomes, attention turns inward toward understanding patterns. How does the body respond to uncertainty? Where does tension accumulate when imagining success? What emotions surface when rest replaces effort? These observations are not analytical exercises, they are acts of presence. Gregg Braden often speaks about coherence as the moment when internal signals synchronize, allowing intention to travel without distortion. Nature offers a quiet metaphor for this process. A tree does not strain to grow taller, it strengthens its roots. When the roots deepen, growth becomes inevitable. Similarly, when internal frequency stabilizes, external results follow with less friction. Financial opportunities begin to appear not as dramatic breakthroughs, but as natural extensions of alignment. Conversations change, choices feel clearer, timing improves without force. This does not mean fear disappears, it means fear no longer leads. The nervous system learns that expansion does not equal danger. Over time, the body releases its attachment to scarcity as a survival strategy. The mind no longer scans constantly for what might go wrong. In this space, creativity returns. Vision widens. Prosperity becomes sustainable because it is no longer built on urgency. The most subtle shift occurs in identity, when a person no longer sees themselves as someone trying to escape lack, but as someone learning to inhabit coherence. Behavior reorganizes naturally. Actions become deliberate instead of compulsive. Rest becomes productive rather than guilt-inducing. Money stops being an emotional battleground and becomes a neutral flow responding to clarity. Inner frequency, then, is not something mystical to chase, but a relationship to one's own internal state. Financial reality responds not to wishes, but to the quality of presence behind them. When coherence replaces tension, the external world adjusts accordingly, quietly, steadily, and often in ways that feel less like effort and more like recognition. The invisible agreement. Between the individual and the collective field, every financial experience unfolds within a wider field of influence that most people sense but rarely articulate. No one creates reality in isolation. Beneath personal effort exists a collective emotional atmosphere shaped by shared fears, inherited beliefs, cultural narratives, and unspoken agreements about worth, success, and limitation. This atmosphere functions like an invisible current. Some move with it unconsciously, others resist it instinctively, but few pause long enough to understand how deeply it informs personal outcomes. Modern neuroscience and ancient wisdom converge on a subtle truth. The human nervous system is relational. It constantly reads its environment for cues of safety or threat, belonging or exclusion. Money, in this context, becomes a social signal rather than a neutral resource. When a collective carries unresolved anxiety around survival, individuals absorb that tension even when their personal circumstances appear stable. Gregg Braden describes this phenomenon as emotional entrainment, the tendency of biological systems to synchronize with dominant surrounding frequencies. This explains why financial stress can persist even during moments of external success. The mind registers improvement, yet the body remains vigilant, anticipating loss. The individual may have outgrown personal scarcity, but remains embedded in a field where lack is normalized. Media narratives, economic uncertainty, and generational memory quietly reinforce this atmosphere. Over time, the body learns to anticipate contraction as a default state, mistaking familiarity for truth. Carl Jung offered a powerful lens through the concept of the collective unconscious. He observed that certain patterns repeat across cultures, not because they are logical, but because they are emotionally inherited. Beliefs about money often fall into this category. Stories of struggle, sacrifice, and moral conflict around wealth become archetypal, shaping behavior without conscious consent. These archetypes do not announce themselves, they whisper through instinct and reaction. Within this collective field, many people develop an internal conflict. On one level, there is a desire for freedom, comfort, and creative expression. On another, there is a subtle fear of standing apart, of becoming visible, of disrupting inherited narratives. Prosperity then feels both attractive and threatening. The nervous system hesitates not out of laziness, but out of loyalty to unseen bonds. Belonging can feel safer than expansion. Joe Dispenza explains that coherence is disrupted when internal intention conflicts with emotional memory. In financial terms, this appears as cycles of progress followed by unexplained regression. The individual may unknowingly recalibrate back to the emotional average of their environment. This is not failure. It is biology responding to perceived social equilibrium. The system seeks familiarity, even when familiarity limits growth. Awareness of the collective field changes the meaning of responsibility. Financial stagnation is no longer interpreted as personal inadequacy, but as a signal of misalignment between individual evolution and collective conditioning. This shift softens self-judgment and opens space for clarity. When identity loosens its attachment to inherited patterns, perception sharpens. One begins to notice how language, expectations, and emotional responses have been shaped by forces never consciously chosen. Nature again offers a quiet metaphor. A school of fish moves as one organism, responding instantly to subtle changes in current. Any single fish that alters direction influences the movement of the whole, not through force, but through resonance. Human systems operate similarly. When one nervous system stabilizes into coherence, it subtly alters the emotional field around it. Conversations shift, opportunities reorganize, new possibilities emerge without confrontation. This does not require separation from society or rejection of collective reality. It involves relationship rather than resistance. The individual begins to sense when emotional responses belong to the present moment and when they echo inherited tension. This discernment restores choice. Financial decisions become less reactive to fear-based narratives and more responsive to internal clarity. The collective field does not punish those who evolve beyond it. It adapts. But adaptation begins with perception. When a person recognizes that much of their financial anxiety is borrowed rather than intrinsic, a quiet release occurs. The body exhales. The mind relaxes its vigilance. Energy previously spent on unconscious defense becomes available for creativity and discernment. Prosperity in this context is not accumulation against others, but coherence within the whole. It emerges when personal frequency stabilizes enough to interact with the collective without being overwhelmed by it. The individual no longer needs to fight the current or surrender to it. Movement becomes fluid, responsive, and grounded. The invisible agreement between the individual and the collective shifts when awareness enters the relationship. Financial reality responds not to rebellion, but to coherence. As internal signals stabilize, the surrounding field reorganizes subtly, creating space for prosperity that feels sustainable, relational, and aligned with a deeper sense of belonging rather than separation. Identity, memory, and the silent architecture of prosperity. Financial reality is often discussed as a matter of strategy, discipline, or opportunity, yet beneath these visible factors lies a quieter structure that determines how consistently prosperity can be sustained. This structure is identity. Not identity as a set of labels or roles, but identity as the sum of emotional memory, self-perception, and the nervous system's expectations about what is normal and safe. Long before income changes, identity has already decided what feels permissible. The body carries memory differently than the mind. While the intellect understands possibility, the body remembers experience. Joe Dispenza explains that emotional states repeated over time become familiar chemical signatures. When these signatures dominate, they form an internal baseline. The body then seeks to return to that baseline regardless of conscious intention. This is why sudden financial gains can feel destabilizing rather than liberating. The external shift conflicts with the internal memory of self. Many people unknowingly identify with struggle, not because they enjoy it, but because it has shaped their sense of competence and resilience. Overcoming obstacles becomes part of self-definition. Rest, ease, and flow can feel foreign, even undeserved. In this identity structure, prosperity threatens coherence rather than reinforcing it. The nervous system searches for tension to restore familiarity. Opportunities may be delayed, minimized, or unconsciously avoided to maintain internal consistency. Napoleon Hill observed that wealth follows those who see themselves as its natural counterpart. This was not a moral statement, but a psychological one. Identity operates as a filter. Experiences that align with it are absorbed easily, while those that contradict it feel unstable and temporary. When someone sees themselves as perpetually trying, success arrives as an exception rather than a norm. When identity shifts toward coherence, prosperity feels less like achievement and more like expression. Carl Jung's work offers insight into why identity resists change even when circumstances demand it. He described the shadow as the collection of traits and emotions that remain unintegrated. In financial terms, the shadow often holds beliefs about power, visibility, and responsibility. Wealth can activate these shadows, bringing fears of loss, judgment, or isolation to the surface. Without awareness, the psyche protects itself by returning to familiar limits. Memory also plays a role in how future outcomes are anticipated. The mind uses past experience to predict what is likely. If effort historically led to disappointment, hope becomes cautious. If success led to conflict or pressure, expansion feels risky. These associations operate silently, shaping expectation before logic intervenes. Over time, the future begins to resemble the past, not because it must, but because identity expects it to. The concept of coherence becomes central here. When thoughts, emotions, and self-perception align, identity stabilizes into a new configuration. The body no longer needs to defend an outdated version of self. Financial growth then integrates smoothly rather than disruptively. This integration is subtle. It does not announce itself with dramatic shifts, but with a sense of normalcy around outcomes that once felt distant. Nature reflects this process through seasonal change. A tree does not question whether it deserves to bear fruit. It responds to internal readiness. When roots are strong and conditions are right, fruit appears naturally. Identity functions as those roots. When internal structure supports expansion, results emerge without force. Prosperity becomes fragile when identity lags behind circumstance. A sudden increase in income without internal integration often produces anxiety rather than freedom. The individual remains alert, waiting for the loss that feels inevitable. This vigilance consumes energy and gradually recreates conditions that justify it. In contrast, when identity evolves alongside external change, stability replaces urgency. This evolution does not require rejecting past selves. It involves acknowledging how previous identities formed and honoring their role in survival. Many patterns that limit prosperity once protected emotional safety. Recognizing this reduces internal conflict. The nervous system relaxes when it no longer feels judged for its adaptations. In this relaxation, new configurations become possible. Greg Braden speaks about emotional permission as a prerequisite for sustained change. Identity grants or withholds this permission. When the self-concept expands to include ease, abundance stops feeling like an intrusion. It becomes congruent with who one understands themselves to be. The silent architecture of prosperity is built through identity alignment rather than external pressure. When memory, emotion, and self-perception reorganize into coherence, financial reality follows naturally. What once required effort begins to flow, not because circumstances suddenly favor the individual, but because the individual no longer resists the experience of receiving. In this space, prosperity is no longer chased or feared. It is recognized as a reflection of internal stability. Identity becomes the quiet anchor that allows wealth to arrive, remain, and evolve without threatening the coherence of the self. When daily life becomes a channel for coherent prosperity, prosperity rarely arrives as a dramatic event. More often, it reveals itself through subtle reorganizations of daily life, moments so ordinary they are easily overlooked. The way attention moves through the day, the emotional tone carried into routine interactions, the inner dialogue that accompanies simple decisions, these are the quiet channels through which financial reality takes shape. What feels repetitive or mundane is, in truth, where coherence is either reinforced or slowly dissolved. Many people imagine prosperity as something that happens outside their normal rhythm, as if wealth belongs to a future version of life rather than the present one. This perception creates a division between who they are now and who they believe they must become. The nervous system senses this split as instability. When life feels fragmented in this way, even positive change can register as unsafe. Coherence, however, emerges when daily experience begins to feel internally aligned, regardless of external circumstance. Joe Dispenza often describes the importance of emotional rehearsal, not as visualization in the abstract, but as the embodiment of a future state in the present moment. The body, after all, does not differentiate between real and imagined experiences when emotion is involved. If daily life is lived in a constant state of anticipation or defense, the body remains chemically anchored to survival. Financial expansion struggles to integrate in an environment dominated by urgency. The way time is experienced plays a crucial role here. When the mind constantly projects forward, measuring today against an imagined future, the present moment becomes a problem to be solved rather than a space to inhabit. This orientation subtly communicates lack. The nervous system learns that fulfillment exists elsewhere, never here. Over time, this creates a restless inner climate where nothing fully satisfies. Prosperity, even when it appears, feels incomplete. In contrast, coherence develops when presence deepens within ordinary moments. Attention settles into what is actually occurring rather than what should be happening. Emotional energy stabilizes. The body relaxes its constant scanning for threat or opportunity. In this state, perception sharpens. Choices feel clearer not because outcomes are guaranteed, but because internal noise has quieted. This clarity often precedes external improvement. Carl Jung wrote about individuation as the process of becoming whole rather than perfect. Applied to prosperity, this suggests that wealth stabilizes when it supports wholeness instead of compensating for inner division. When money is unconsciously tasked with providing security, validation, or identity, it carries emotional weight it cannot sustain. Daily life becomes a negotiation with anxiety. Coherence returns when prosperity is allowed to be supportive rather than symbolic. Small interactions reflect this shift. Conversations feel less charged. Decisions feel less rushed. The body responds with a sense of groundedness that does not depend on outcome. Over time, this internal stability influences behavior in subtle but significant ways. Opportunities are recognized more easily. Boundaries clarify. Energy is allocated more intentionally. Financial patterns begin to reorganize without force. Nature again provides an instructive parallel. A river does not rush toward the ocean. It follows gravity, adapting to terrain with patience and persistence. Obstacles do not stop its movement. They shape its path. Daily life functions similarly when coherence guides it. Resistance decreases. Movement becomes efficient rather than exhausting. Progress continues even when pace appears slow. Greg Braden emphasizes that the heart plays a regulatory role in coherence, influencing how the brain interprets experience. When emotional states stabilize, cognitive function improves. This integration affects financial perception as well. Risk is assessed more accurately. Creativity increases. Solutions appear not through pressure, but through insight. Daily life becomes less about control and more about responsiveness. This does not eliminate uncertainty. It changes the relationship to it. Uncertainty becomes information rather than threat. The nervous system learns that not knowing does not equal danger. This shift alone reduces internal friction dramatically. When fear loosens its grip, energy previously consumed by worry becomes available for creation. Prosperity sustained over time depends on this integration. External structures may fluctuate, but internal coherence provides continuity. Daily habits, thoughts, and emotional responses align gradually into a stable pattern. Wealth, in this context, is not a destination reached, but a condition maintained through presence. As daily life becomes a channel rather than an obstacle, financial reality adjusts accordingly. The individual no longer waits for prosperity to begin living fully. Living fully becomes the condition through which prosperity flows. Coherence transforms the ordinary into the foundation for durable abundance, allowing wealth to integrate naturally into a life that already feels internally whole. The journey toward prosperity is not one of force, but of alignment. It is a quiet transformation that begins within, shaping the way we perceive ourselves, our environment, and our relationship with abundance. True financial growth is rooted in the coherence of thought, emotion, and energy. As we stabilize our internal frequency, we naturally begin to attract the wealth, opportunities, and peace we desire. It is not enough to chase prosperity externally. We must first create a solid foundation within, one built on self-awareness, clarity, and a deep trust in the process. When we align our energy with the flow of abundance, we find that prosperity is not something we need to fight for. It is something we become in harmony with. Prosperity is not a distant future. It is a present reality waiting to unfold when we are ready to embrace it, not as a destination, but as an ongoing, dynamic process of transformation. Are you ready to stop chasing wealth and start living it through alignment and coherence? If this resonates with you, subscribe to the channel and keep watching for more insights on how to transform your life. Your journey toward a prosperous life begins now. Don't let this moment pass.